Greetings and welcome, everyone. This is the 7th webinar of the PLP Pathways 2018-2019 webinar series. And today we're going to be talking about exploration, student-driven inquiry, and community learning opportunities. Before we go any further, I'd like our PLP Pathways contributors to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Kevin Pioli-Hunt. I'm a 5th to 8th grade generalist on Swift House at Wilson Central School.
Hi, I'm Maura Wheeler. I'm the Proficiency-Based Learning and Technology Integration Coach at Lamoille South Supervisory Union.
Hi, I'm Meg O'Donnell. I teach on the Alpha team at Shelburne Community School.
And I'm Sam Nelson, and I teach on the Winton team at Shelburne Community School.
All right, everybody, thank you very much, and welcome again. The theme this month relates to our discussion of flexible pathways and community resources that we talked about last year. However, we wanted to address this idea of exploring opportunities for students. And each of us will talk about how that works with their students. But for me, really what I'm trying to do is to create opportunities for kids to explore activities, camps, colleges, and careers through guided exploration, so that not only do the students understand what's available, but also that families understand how to keep kids connected to programs related to their interests, and that can help support them as they transition across the summer. So Meg O'Donnell is going to start us out. And Meg, do you want to talk about why exploration?
Sure. Some of the resources that we have posted on our site talk a little bit about how waiting until high school is really too late at this point for kids to have that exploration time, because there's so much happening for them in middle school that makes it a ripe opportunity for us to kind of harness that. I was just reading some of the resources around it, and it talked about what are the negative impacts, what are the negative factors that contribute to kids kind of checking out, and if those factors don't happen just in high school, but there are signs of them already happening in middle school. So is their attendance, do they have low attendance? Do they have low grades? Are they like increase in behavior incidents? Those are kind of at-risk kids. And those are the kiddos, it's not only those kiddos, but that idea is established in middle school. And what we want to try to do is tap into those kids and better meet their needs earlier on, so that we can help them see themselves as positive, contributing, effective adults, essentially. That if you can do this in middle school, if you can start thinking about your future in middle school, then the incidents that are happening won't negatively impact them. I'm not sure if I articulated that very well, but I think what it struck for me was the chord was the conversations that we've been having all along have been around how are we establishing relationships with kids? How are we engaging students? How are we helping them to see themselves as proficient learners? How are we establishing community? How are we establishing identity? And taking that lens, not just in terms of the academic components that we need to do, but also this idea of what's your future hold? What's down the road for you? Where are you going? We don't want anyone to sort of start job hunting yet necessarily. We want them to keep their options open, but we want them to see themselves as effective contributors or controllers of where their future lies. I was looking at some of the self and world questions that the students, that our kiddos had from when we did self and world questions at the beginning of the year. And they have questions like, how will my choices now affect my future? How will my learning styles affect my job? Here was another one over here that was, what advice can I give to my future self? What will I be like in the future, and how will on the world. So there, how are my talents and interests determined, and how are those going to contribute to my career choices? So they are, as they're exploring their own identity, they're wondering about how those things are going to bridge them into the future. So that was sort of a, like, why now? Why in middle school? Why are we thinking about these things? And how do we help create intentional opportunities for kids to start really understanding what that's going to look like.
So speaking of those intentional opportunities for kids to explore their future, can folks talk about maybe some of the structures that they have in place where they are having kids explore and how that fits into the curriculum, and maybe also how that fits into personal learning plans? And anybody is free to start and contribute.
Yeah, I can. Well, we can talk a little bit about Sam and I at Shelburne. We do have these. We have personal interest projects. That's a school-wide system that we've put in place over the last 2 years, where kids are choosing a project of interest to them, where they can really explore any possible opportunity. So it's really, what are your interests? What's an experience that you might have that will help manifest that interest? Who's a mentor? Who's someone in the field where you can go out and explore the possibilities of that? I've got kiddos that are meeting with bread bakers, with filmmakers, with artists, with woodworking. So there's a lot of opportunities for them through this personal interest project to go out and explore different possibilities.
Okay. What are other folks doing with regards to exploration and future opportunities?
I can chime in real quick. Let me know if you can hear me all right. I know my mic's not working too well. That's okay?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Good. Okay, great. So a couple things we do. Our 8th graders on our team do what's called an 8th grade challenge, and we it's pretty much a similar version to what they'll do in high school at CVU. So they choose a topic that they're interested in at the beginning of the year, and then they study that throughout the year. And the culminating event with that is when we take them on their end of the year field trip, which is either to New York City or Washington, D.C. with our whole team. They have the opportunity to interview somebody in the field, so a professional in the field. And really, that for us is a great way of just giving them some exposure to something that they're interested in, something that they might already have experience with. And like Mike says, it's getting them linked up with different mentors and going through some of those soft skills with like making phone calls and writing emails and just conducting an interview. So that's one way that we kind of help the exploration piece with our older students. And then outside of that, we do our field trips with the whole team. So again, that's something that all 5th through 8th graders have, again, the opportunity to just get exposure to some different things that they might be interested in the future. And this year we just started up our sustainability unit. So pretty much the core of our curriculum is PLPs and the sustainability of the UN Global Goals lens. And again, they've been really taking on just their interest and thinking about what they're interested in that's related to the global goals, and connecting again with the community, thinking about outreach, thinking about what are some things they can do now and continue to do in the future that's related specifically to those UN developmental goals.
Okay. Lindsay, do you want to just introduce yourself? Thanks for coming on. And do you have any thoughts about exploration or structures that were occurring when you were in the classroom, and how that and how you connected that to future learning opportunities?
Yes, hi. Sorry I was late. I'm Lindsay Hallman, and I work with Up for Learning. And I would echo some of the things I already heard. But when I was working in the classroom, we had a project block time every day, and that was really built around career exploration without really saying that. For many years, we used the Sustainable Development Goals as our framework, and young people chose projects that they were interested in, and that in itself was career exploration because they were working with community partners. They were developing the skills that they needed to conduct interviews and see what work is going on outside of the school building. So going into the community for a mentorship or an internship or just an observational visit. That was built into our curriculum. And so we then wove other aspects of our curriculum into our project block. But either having folks from the community, experts in different fields come in to support different aspects of our own curriculum, and or going out into the community beyond the school building and seeing what is going on in different careers with a strong part of the program with the Edge.
Okay, thank you very much. One thing I just want to mention before we start getting into some of the specific activities that maybe just some more details. I came up with the Voices for Vermont's Children is an organization based here in Montpelier, and I think they're tied to the Annie E. Casey Foundation. And they have a paper called Education Matters, the Impacts of Systemic Inequity in Vermont. And I was reading this for another project, and they have a whole section on out-of-school programs. And in my classroom, I used to do an exploration of careers, and the kids enjoyed that. But it often felt like we were talking about things that were too far in the future. And so instead, what I did is I modified that. So now we do an exploration unit that starts with camps and local opportunities. And so in particular, activities that are happening in the summertime. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but it seems to me that there have been more and more camps developed around things like coding, around things like STEM, around things like that are science and nature that are deeply connected to some of our core curriculum concepts. And so a lot of these camps, I read today that there's something like 460 different opportunities for kids during the summer. But a lot of kids and a lot of families don't understand or don't recognize those opportunities. And so one of the reasons we do the exploration, particularly at this time of year, is that a lot of camps are starting to offer or be offered. And there's a ton of stuff going on in Vermont on college campuses that are not college or career related. But for instance, the Governor's Institute, those happen on campuses. And I think it's really important to get kids exposed to those opportunities. And I just want to read from this paper. It says, studies show that participation in summer and after-school programs can dramatically reduce achievement gaps. Consistent participation in after-school activities in elementary school can help close the gap in math achievement between low-income and high-income children by grade 5. And I really hadn't even, again, one of the reasons I do this is to get kids exposed and understanding what their future is. I really like the way Meg brought in these questions that kids have about their future. But this article, reading this article, tells me that getting some of our kids who don't have opportunities hooked into programs can be a really important way of boosting their academic achievement and their ideas about school. And Lindsay has her hand up, so I'm going to turn it over to her. But again, this was really interesting, especially as we're starting to hear conversations about equity for kids. Lindsay?
Yes, and on that note, I think you bring up an important point, but the whole idea of summer camp is just drenched in inequities. I know as a parent who is preparing for my daughter to be in camps in the summer since I work, I recognize there's financial assistance and scholarships, but there's not enough, and the camps are incredibly expensive. So when we're thinking about opportunities in the summer, I think it's great to think about the fact that if we provide our young people with these opportunities both after school, which costs money, and in the summer, then we need to be thinking about how can we provide these opportunities in a way that everyone has access to, because they are not accessible. Even as as a working parent, I have to think about my own, is this even, it's pretty, and I think, I don't know, Meg, I see you nodding. Donna, yeah. It really, it's been something I'm struggling with, just, professionally, because I believe so deeply in those experiences, but I think we can't rely on these, thinking that our kids are going to be going to, our kids being our students, going to summer camp and after school activities, because they're not accessible, they're not affordable. And there's limited, financial assistance. I think people try as hard as possible to give scholarships. So that means that our schools need to provide those experiences during the 180 days of the year.
And I think you bring up such an important point, Linz. It's true. It is really, it will require, you're reminding me to be mindful that, when we go into this economics unit, we start thinking about this. And I want to give, I really want to hear from Sam, some of the things that Sam's done the last couple of years with 8th graders and with his students around really exploring careers and opportunities. And it sounds really awesome. And I wonder if while he's doing that, I want to be thinking about, so how do we find resources for kids where there isn't that financial burden, or there is that opportunity to network for them?
And I just want to add real quick, Meg. Lindsay, I totally agree with everything that you're saying. And when you say drenched in inequity, I couldn't agree more. And the question for me is, if these experiences are so valuable and so important, like a kid can get on a college campus and they can see a computer lab, and if that can get them engaged, the question, you're absolutely right, is how can we get that to more and more kids? And one of the proposals in this paper is that schools need to become community centers. So rather than just having that 180 days, maybe we could be having school-based camps and opportunities.
Right.
And the other thing too, Lindsay, I know you're always a big, huge proponent of the school student and family relationship. So how are we communicating to parents who are, in some cases, working and out straight? How can we be communicating to them about the opportunities that are available and the scholarships that are available, so that they can go to these and they, if it's that positive, what are we doing to support not only the understanding and the knowledge of them, but also to get the kids in those seats, right? And so as an organization, PLP Pathways, how can we be, thinking about that as an idea about how do we get more kids? Because we all know, the kids who do go to those camps have all these enriching experiences, and it's just not fair, right? And go ahead, yeah.
No, well, what I was just going to say was coming off of yesterday's family conference, where there were 270 middle school students and teachers there, majority students, and some schools send like 10 and 15 kiddos, like having those opportunities to bring kids to a college campus that, while there was a fee involved for the school, it was so powerful to have, and we had 4th and 5th graders there. It's not just 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, but we had younger kids there, and for them to, for those students to dine in a cafeteria and sit in wheelie chairs in the college classroom and see the technology there, and just that's one way. What are those other opportunities that might be a combination of professional development and student empowerment that can give kids those exposures to what's out there?
I think those are all great points. One thing I want to make sure that Sam has the opportunity to talk about his game of life. And for those of viewers out there, I did tweet earlier this afternoon a blog post from Sam about that game of life. And Sam, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to transition us there from this really big, much bigger than just this webinar conversation about equity and giving kids exposure to like meaningful hands-on collaborative learning. And I think if there's like going back to what Lindsay said about the idea that schools need to be the ones who take on these opportunities for students and make it part of the academic day, I think there's a little bit of light starting to shine through where we see things like this. And just speaking from my experience here at Shelburne and when I was at People's Academy, things like PIPs, like Meg was describing, where you're bringing in community resources and having those people and those artisans and those those craftspeople working with students to kind of same students to have that true flexible pathway opportunity of collaborating with an expert. That's on us. Like, we need to be doing that more. And at People's Academy, they like with experts, are they still called experts, Maura? Like, kind of that model of like mini classes where students are just trying stuff, because if there's a perfect time for students to be exploring different learning venues and opportunities and experiences, it's early adolescence, when like they might try it out and realize they hate it. They might try it out and catch fire, and that could develop a career pathway. So if there's a good time to do it, it's now.
Mm-hmm.
And between those things and even like what we've had here at Shelburne with Arts and Citizenship, which is getting students even out in the community during the school day. I'm thinking of, was it called like Maple Leaf Day at People's Academy more, right? You know what I'm talking about? Like getting fifth graders out in the community during the day. So yeah, I mean, I think those are a little bit of like, there's a little bit of light shining through with trying to find, equitable ways to get students plugged in. But yeah, if I can transition to game of life, like this goes back a few years ago when I was really trying to bring in 8th grade student voice about like, why is it every spring 8th graders totally suffer from 8th graderitis? They're not engaged, they're checked out. And, being the teacher trying to just work with them, not fight 8th graderitis, I was just like, what do you guys want to do that's going to get you ready for the, for the future? And so this has really over the years started to take the shape in two ways. Looking at the near future has been students saying, we want to learn how to do the things outside of school that are in our near future. We're graduating 14-year-olds. They're going to be applying for their first jobs pretty soon. So in class, what we started doing, and this has actually been really fun, is I'll go print like minimum wage job applications. I can find them online, or I can go to some of the local businesses and snag a bunch. And in class, they'll actually fill them out, and we'll take them and process them and give them feedback on like, how are you selling yourself as a viable candidate, which is a hard thing to do if it's your first job you're applying for. You have no experience. You might have a couple of resources. And we're even working with students of like, you gotta sell yourself on paper. So that's where you can talk about maybe some of like the personal interest projects you've been involved with, or some of like the internships in school you've done where you worked at Shelburne News and got published in the paper as part of your like arts and citizenship experience. So that felt good to them. Engagement goes way up because they did that. That moved into them filling out resumes. Another thing that the students are the ones asking to do this. I would have guessed that it would feel really oppressive for a teacher to tell students you're going to create a resume, but they're asking to do it. So we look at a bunch of examples. They break down what goes on a resume. How does that work for someone with little to no work experience? And then they even are asking, like, can we do job interviews? So we are either conducting job interviews by breaking down students into small groups, or I've made like a interview questionnaire that they fill out just to kind of get them thinking about the kind of questions that might be asked when, again, if you're a 14, 15-year-old and you've never done that before, that's kind of scary. It's definitely something that could use some coaching, and what a cool opportunity to do it in school. In fact, even this year, for the first time, I brought in helping them start prepping for the driver's permit test.
Oh,
so we did that this year, which was really fun. We kind of gamified it. And then again, it's so funny, you're onto something good when students are asking, hey, can we have a huge, difficult multiple choice test in class? Ungraded, of course, but they're asking, like, can we do this with our time? Because we know we have to do it. And you've either got super supportive parents at home that are helping you with that, or you have to do it all your own. Right. So that has kind of taken the shape of what them wanting to kind of plan for the near future is. But they are also thinking about careers. There are the students that have like no idea, aren't thinking about it. There are students who have kind of inflated ideas of, well, I'm just going to be in the NBA. It's totally cool because I love basketball. And then there are the students who have like kind of a more like reality-based idea of what the future might be like. So what we did was a few things inspired this, mostly students helping me design this and evolve it over the past few years. And part of it was my experience at People's Academy, when every 8th grader, or at least the year I was teaching there, would go visit the local tech center, which I thought was really powerful because, by 8th grade, whether it's through siblings, friends, or just word of mouth, students have an idea of what the next step, what high school might be like. But one of those inequitable systems that I think exists in all public schools is that it's a challenge for an 8th grader to start thinking about what high school learning looks like. But a disservice that we make to them is to prepare them for high school thinking you're only doing it right if you're in a quote unquote traditional classroom, you're working your way toward
Right.
AP classes. And then after that, of course,
Yeah.
4 years, and then you apply to a 4-year college.
Absolutely.
Like, as great as that sounds, it's not the career arc of many, many people. And we're really aiming at the wrong target if we're trying to get every kid to even go to college.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's all about like what the career pathway they're developing as they go requires. And, to put it simply, the thing I would want to avoid is lying to students and saying my goal is for every single one of you to go to college, because if they're like me and they just apply to a 4-year college and then go, and then 2 years in realize I don't know what the heck I'm doing here,
Right.
you're wasting your money, you're wasting your time, and you could have done something much more meaningful to help develop a career.
Yeah.
So basically what that's looked like is trying to kind of make looking at careers feel meaningful to students, to have them be the ones in the driver's seat, and not make the mistake of going, okay, well, what if you just pick a career and then you learn all about what that career is like? Because again, that's not going to feel very meaningful, because even getting to a career, like probably many of us, can be a really messy kind of journey full of tangents and missteps and all that. So in comes the game of life. That was very much student driven. My student planning committee, they want to make it feel more like a game. So, for those of you that look at the blog posts, you can see I basically put resource together that all started with the interest profiler called My Next Move. It's from ONET, and it's I found this through VSAC. It's really helpful, where they do a really thorough interest profiler, and then it puts you in a position where it matches you with an array of job types at 5 different levels, depending on what kind of training you need
If
to.
you're going on the late bus, keep
Sorry.
it out in the circle, and I need someone to come and pick up the list. Thank you.
Depending on what kind of training you might need to get those careers, it launches you in. You can click down into it. It just keeps going layer after layer, where you can look at like, what kind of training do you need for the job? Where are those jobs available? What's the average salary like? So there's lots of layers to it. So students start with that. They spend a bunch of time kind of picking out like a handful of career possibilities that they're interested in. And then they start to go after one of them. And again, instead of just learning all about the career, it's learning about what do you need to get there. It's really developing the pathway, not the end game. So they start doing things like looking at what's high school going to look like. Would you need to go to a tech program? Would you be taking certain classes in high school? And then it's looking at once you've graduated and you've got your degree, what's the next step? Do you need to go to a college? Do you need to do some sort of internship or apprenticeship? Or do you need to use the military? Like, is that a viable option? So you can get whatever training you need paid. But that goes along with, of course, a military commitment. And then it just kind of keeps going layer after layer, where they start to pick, okay, so where do you want to live? That's going to affect how much money you make and the job availability. And then from there, you need to do some of the, as students say, like you need to do some of the adulting, meaning figure out a place to live, whether it's renting or buying a home. So they're using Zillow for that. They are using things like not just Google tools, but they're choosing things that are like hobby based for their careers. Like you've got a certain amount of money that needs to go in paying off your debt. You got a certain amount of money that goes to your living expenses. What else do you want to use some of that money for while still saving? So there's actually a ton of embedded math. I think that's why Mego was thinking about this and think in terms of economics. So it's fun, it's engaging. Part of what makes it feel game based is that we have these points where we stop and do fate cards, and you draw blindly a fate card from a hat, and that can mess with your life. Nothing super like morbid, but like you'll have things like, oh, the apartment flooded and you just lost like $6,000 worth of equipment, or oh, you had a great relative pass away and you just inherited $3,000. Like nothing that is super impactful, but feels kind of fun and Monopoly like in terms of like bonuses or negatives in terms of like your fiscal life. So yeah, there's a lot of layers to it. It's fun. Students were super engaged. And I think the only thing I want to add to it to wrap this up is while looking at this, one of the big things in terms of that short-term future was I want every 8th grade graduate to really understand what their pathways might be at high school, which is why they not only, we do like a little bit of a scavenger hunt thing, which was inspired by the People's Academy trip, which holy cow, that's what started this whole thing. We actually go and visit the tech centers that our school is a sending school for. So we go to Burlington Tech Center, we spend a day, and it's not just window.
Mackenzie, love, please get out to the bus.
It's not just,
Mackenzie, the bus is waiting.
it's not just window shopping. Like we actually go in, they interact, they do kind of a scavenger hunt while they're in the programs. And then there are 3 like hands-on activities. They get to experience a little bit of what that program's like. They're going to be doing the same at the Center for Technology in Essex this spring. And what I'm really trying to do is also bring in CVU as a partner. So CVU can kind of come in and then talk with 8th graders about what learning can look like beyond just like filling out what classes you're going to sign up for.
I think you're muted, Don.
Oh no.
That's awesome. That sounds like a lot of work. And
Yeah.
but again, based on what I saw online, it looks really engaging. One question I have for Maura, as someone who's working with teachers and helping design instruction, is exploration of flexible pathways or exploration of sort of, as Sam said, you know, the my next move. Is that something that you're encouraging across the district, or is that something that's left up to the individual teachers?
I think sort of as we're thinking about personalization and focusing on building community and relationship with kids, that exploration and thinking forward, sort of having a sort of, to use the term, a growth mindset, but we're constantly setting goals and looking towards the future with kids as an expectation. And, you know, definitely working with schools about structures, like, for example, Sam was talking about what used to be called experts, which is now called opportunity time, which is a time within the schedule every day dedicated to either students working on personal learning projects or doing exploration. We also utilize flex schedulers, so we can either call students back for enrichment or proficiency recovery. And those are structural pieces, especially when we look ahead to the high school. Like, what are the systems that we have in place that could potentially be barriers to doing these things? And so there are some more systemic things, like if you are really committed to helping kids identify passions and partner with them to grow, you need to do an audit of your schedule and say, how are we prioritizing this or making space for teachers to do this work? Just as if we believe that building relationships and building a culture within our school where we have that relationship with learners, we need to look at our schedule and say, where are we prioritizing advisories? And how are we creating these spaces for kids that they can then grow into? And so I think my focus is really on the systems and the structures and how are we building those things so that then teachers, based on what their kids want, they can then grow into it. Because I think, you know, we've talked a lot about this when we're talking about personalization. The students are really the drivers of it. So it's hard to say everyone's going to do this thing or every classroom's going to go through the same process, because when you are really, truly, and deeply listening to your kids and partnering with them, it's going to look different based on the cohort of the students that you have.
Again, that's an excellent point. And I think, again, we hear so much about relationships and we hear about listening to the kids. I think also throughout this idea of exploration and helping kids think about their future, I just want to go back to what Lindsay was talking about in terms, you know, and all of us understand these deep-seated inequities in the system, and how are we going to overcome those so that we can give kids the opportunity to explore and to create the futures that they want and that they can, you know, that they can begin building as young adolescents. I am mindful of the time. I wanted to ask if anybody has any last comments, or also are there events that are happening down the road that people we should be keeping an eye out for. Again, I know that Lindsay and Meg just ran the Beyond Bullying Conference. I'd love to have a blog post or hear more about that. Are there other professional events that people have on their radar? And we'll start in the same order that we introduced ourselves. We'll start with Kevin, and then we'll go Maura, Meg, Sam, and then Lindsay.
I have the VTech Vermont, where is it? Higher Education Collaborative is doing something on April 5th down in Montpelier. And I know that's Bill Rich is putting that on with a focus on flexible pathways.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's $190 per participant. And he's bringing a ton of just educators and students to kind of talk about their experience with flexible pathways. So that is one that I know is coming up sooner than later.
Okay. Maura?
So there's actually a series of 3 professional development events that Vermont Higher Ed Collaborative is putting on. One of them is on March 19th, Confronting Gender-Based Inequity. On the 12th of April, they have another one called Whose Country Is This? I believe it's Race, Racism, and Refugee Status. And then the other one is having Paul Gorski come, and I think that one's in May. These are only $35. And I know a lot of schools are doing work around equity and culturally sustaining practices right now. And so that's really great, some really great options. The other thing, there's a free webinar EdWeek is putting out about middle school students' academic and social emotional learning, focusing on new research and best practices. And that's on Tuesday, March 19th from 2 to 3, and that one's free.
Awesome, thank you. Meg and Sam?
I was going to say the thing that Kev shared, and then we also have Stan and Emily. So Stan Williams and Emily Rankum are going to do some stuff on standards-based structures and working from their book that I don't certainly gets at that idea of flexible pathways through how we use standards-based learning.
Awesome. Lindsay? And, sorry, Sam?
Well, I'll just add that I'm excited to go to one of the ones Maura mentioned. I'm going to Whose Country Is This? Because we started for the first year a diversity and inclusion group with teachers. And then one of the teachers there and I started a student diversity and inclusion group. So I'm excited about that. And then Dynamic Landscapes, it's always in late May. And I think I'm presenting 1 or 2 topics at that.
Good. Lindsay?
Yeah, so I'll be at all 3 of the higher ed collaborative. It was kind of the follow-up to Paul Gorski's initial 2-day in the fall. And so the one on Tuesday is Confronting Gender based inequity in the in classrooms, and then I'll be at the other one. So I'll see Sam there. Maura, are you going to be there?
I will be at both of them. Yep.
Awesome. And then some other pieces that I just threw up there. One is March 27th, Up for Learning is co-sponsoring a day with Bill Rich. And I'm not sure what the registration still is on that, but I will double check for everyone. And it's on learner-teacher feedback and providing feedback. And so I think that's at the Capitol Plaza. And so I will link something there. So I'll just find it after this. And then also on May 1st, Up for Learning has an annual conference called the Power Squared Summit. And it's mostly high school teams that come, but there's no reason why middle school teams could not come. And it's at Lake Maury Resort in Fairleigh, and it's around youth and adults working together to create change in their schools, whether it's something around social justice or climate justice or anything really that is, a project that's occurred that they want to present on. And there is an RFP process for presentations that if people are interested, I'll link that as well. And I don't know if that actually is due Monday, March 18th. So I'll link that and I can put that out. So teams actually have to go through an RFP process. That's a nice experience for young people as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you all very much. We'll make sure to post this, either tweet it or post it on the PLP Pathways blog. There's a lot of great things happening, and there's a lot of great work being done around the state, and I appreciate very much everybody's input. Just one last thing. There is a sustainability PLC that's happening in the Montpelier, Central Vermont area. If you know people who are in Central Vermont who are interested in that, last year they were talking. They had the PLC. It's 5 meetings across the spring. It's a great way to meet with educators and hear how they're addressing those issues. Our next webinar is on
April 11th.
April 11th. We'll be talking about building more personalized learning curriculum. Hopefully we'll see everybody at some of these events. I appreciate everybody's input. The days are getting longer. It's getting a little bit warmer, and we can start looking forward to spring. Thank you very much, everybody, for your commitments. You guys are doing a great job, and we will talk to you soon. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.